The reason why we do cybersecurity is to protect our assets. An asset can be anything that provides a value to the organization. It can be anything from computer, server, information stored in a server, and even the employees could be considered an asset. It's not just what you see. Your company reputation, brand value, customer relationship are also the assets. These are called intangible assets, something you cannot see but it is there. And everything about cybersecurity revolves around protecting these assets from the threats. A threat is anything that can harm or damage our asset. A cyber attack, malware infection, or even a natural disaster is a threat. If it causes a harm to our asset, then it is a threat. And anyone who possesses a threat to our asset is called a threat actor. Here, actor represents an entity, which is usually a hacker, but it can also be an employee working inside the company. Such threats from within the company is called the insider threat. Threats look for the weakness in the system, and the weakness is called the vulnerability, and it can be anything from a software bug to a weak lock on the office door. Remember, cybersecurity is also about physical security of our asset. So an efficient heat and ventilation system, use of fire resistance cable, and even a strong door to secure a perimeter may also fall under the domain of cybersecurity. And threat actors perform attacks to exploit these vulnerabilities and compromise our system. There is always some risk when it comes to our asset, and to better illustrate it, we have a model called as a risk assessment model. It is portrayed using a Venn diagram, and this model tells for risks to exist, we need all of the other factors. Let's get our head around this concept. For example, if you have nothing that is worth stealing, no assets, then you got no risks. Again, if you have an asset but it has no vulnerabilities, then again, no one can break it, so you got nothing to worry about. Similarly, if there isn't the threat to exploit our vulnerabilities, then our assets are safe, hence no risks. Just remember, this model is used to better understand the relationship between asset, threat, and vulnerability for an efficient risk management strategy. Risk management is nothing more than just you applying some measures to minimize the risks. For example, on the server, we often patch things up, maybe install the antivirus, or just add this encryption in hope to reduce the vulnerabilities so that the risks gets minimized. I hope you can wrap your head around this concept. Similarly, we have a CIA Triad, which explains how a data should be handled both at rest and during the transmission. The confidentiality aspect suggests that the data should always be in a secure state, especially sensitive information such as social security number, bank details, etc. And just to make sure data is secure, we implement different forms of encryption, both while data is stored on the server and also during the transmission. Encryption has two types, symmetric and asymmetric. We will look into it later on in this video. The integrity means data shouldn't be tampered by an unauthorized person. This one is especially crucial during the transmission because a man-in-the-middle attack can modify what we see. The data should reach the destination in the same state as it was sent by the sender. And to verify the integrity of the data, we generate a hash value, which is just a fixed size value that is unique for different data. Same hash value means data wasn't tampered. Just remember these two things about the hash value. If the input is different, hash value is always unique. Even a small change in the input can give off entirely different hash value. However, if two different inputs produce the same hash value, that is called a collision, and that is a very bad thing. Collision was more common in older hashing algorithms, so please avoid that. Always use the latest hashing algorithm. And the last one is availability, which simply means data should always be available to the authorized person. We ensure availability by having a backup or redundancy to ensure data is not lost. In a way, CIA explains how data should be handled. We have a similar model called the AAA Framework, which outlines how the system should be managed and made available to the others. It stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accountability. And to understand it, let's take a scenario where the user is trying to log into the YouTube. A user goes to YouTube. He provides his email as mrbeast@gmail.com and presses sign in. From the server's point of view, an unknown guy is claiming to be the Mr. Beast. Server then checks the password, and if the password is correct, then the user is authenticated and allowed to log in. You see, authentication is just a process of verifying that the claimed identity by the user is actually true or not. If you are still confused, in short, authentication is the sign-in process. Alright, now there are many channels on YouTube, but after the authentication, our user Mr. Beast should be able to access only his channels because he has an authority over his channels. So you can understand, authorization is a way to provide access to the resources that a user is allowed to or authorized to. And finally, YouTube keeps track of everything that Mr. Beast does on his channel. And accounting is a process of tracking user activities such as video upload, comments, and other operations performed by that user. Accounting is crucial because not only it helps for auditing and monitoring, it also takes us one step closer to accept the non-repudiation principle. Non-repudiation is a security principle which ensures that someone cannot deny the validity of their actions done by their authenticated account. We can achieve this through the use of encryption and digital signatures. Till now, we've established a baseline to what actually cybersecurity is. We have looked at the asset, threats, vulnerabilities, risks along with CIA Triad and AAA Framework. And cybersecurity has many domains. Each term we discuss is a rabbit hole with one hierarchy of tools and concepts. Take it for authentication. It just means signing in. But there are multi-factor authentication, which uses more than one factor such as OTP code, biometrics for successful login. Implementing such complex feature is also a hassle, and it falls under the domain of system administration or software development if you are developing it from the scratch. Now it's time to understand how we actually protect data from the threats. In short, the strongest security comes from the cryptographic tools. These are some tools, but we'll look into these cryptographic tools in the next video. Now that we are aware of assets and threats, let's see how we can protect a simple organization. Right now, we have a small network with all of the devices connected to the central router. Our first goal should always be to not get our asset compromised. But even if we do, our second goal should always be to contain the compromised site. To do that, let's focus on network security. Our router is completely exposed to the internet. Well, it isn't a bad thing, but it isn't the best practice as well. So let's put a firewall at our network boundary between the router and the internet. By the way, a firewall is just a filtration device which accepts or rejects the packet based on the predefined rules. These rules are called as access control list or ACLs in short. Our goal is to keep our internal network safe, but if you notice, there is a web server there that is constantly handling requests from the internet. And if our web server gets compromised for some reason, our internal network will also be exposed. So let's move this web server outside our trusted network, right into the firewall. This zone, which is outside our trusted network, but not yet completely exposed, it is called the Demilitarized zone or DMZ. DMZ is a semi-trusted zone, and we often put those assets that need to be exposed to the internet, like our web server. We place our server here so that even if it gets hacked, our trusted network does not get compromised. I hope you understand this. It is just rational thinking. On the firewall, we usually add different access control for different network zones. The strongest security is placed for the router facing the trusted network. Notice how a firewall is connected to the internet, DMZ, and our trusted internal network. Such design architecture for firewall is called a three-legged perimeter. We can further segment our network by placing each department computers on the different VLAN. If you understand the concept of LAN, then VLAN is just a virtual LAN. Virtual as if we are not physically separating it, it is just configured on the switch. And when VLAN is configured, traffic from one department is not seen by the other department. The traffic gets separated, which minimizes the chance of snooping attacks. But we saw, threat could be anyone, even an employee. So even though we are inside the trusted zone, we should always configure Network Access Control or NAC on the hardware equipment. NAC is just a fancy way of saying put some security on it so that an authorized person cannot access it. Some quick ways to implement NAC are: put a strong password on everything, switches, routers, firewalls, and anything that supports authentication. Second, If you have a wireless access point or a Wi-Fi, then disable the WPS feature and always use the latest security standard. Optionally, you can also put an isolated guest Wi-Fi for the untrusted users. And finally, physical security is just as important, so limit physical access to the hardware components. Server rooms should be locked and only accessed by the authorized person. This should do it for now. At this point, everything feels secure and tight, but we have yet to look at the weakest point in our security. Us, humans. Humans are not perfect, they make mistakes, and the hackers know it, and they often target the employee by phishing or social engineering attacks. One wrong click can compromise the system, so to avoid it, we apply endpoint hardening practices. Some quick tips would be: again, a strong password with multi-factor authentication implemented is always the best idea. Second, keep the system updated, apply patches to the vulnerability, disable unused ports and configurations that could be exploited by the hacker. Third, admins should implement administrative controls such as applying group policy, superuser implementation. These would make sure user cannot run any unnecessary app with elevated privileges. 4. Deploying antivirus and even host-based intrusion detection system is a good measure to monitor the endpoint performance. And finally, a basic cybersecurity awareness can go a long way. Now this should work, but remember, things can always go wrong. There are hundreds of ways a hacker can hack someone, they just need to find one. Let's reflect back on the overall cybersecurity field. Whenever we think about cybersecurity, most of us get an idea of hacking, breaking into the system, and not gonna lie, it is a major part, but there is a lot going on behind the scene. There are people who are defending from cyberattack. We also have someone doing the auditing, someone is doing the forensic on the malware, someone is building the secure programs, someone is providing physical security to the premise, and the point is, there is a role for everyone. You see, there are many domains in cybersecurity, and we have barely scratched the surface in this video. The domain is huge, but don't get intimidated by it. Just find a domain you are interested in and keep learning. As long as you are learning, you are growing as well. I hope this video helped you. This video takes a lot of planning to come to reality. If you love it, please subscribe and suggest me some good ideas. I'll see you in the next session. Bye bye.